Good evening. On behalf of the Symposium Committee for Black Perspectives in Contemporary America, I welcome each of you to this very special occasion. A brief history, Black Perspectives in Contemporary America is a quarterly symposium sponsored by the Black Student Organization in conjunction with the Committee on Lectures and is funded by the government of the student body. The major purpose of Black Perspectives in Contemporary America is to heighten the awareness of students at Iowa State University of the achievements and contributions made by Blacks in America. Moreover, it endeavors to heighten the awareness of students about the many current issues impacting on our lives today. Immediately following the address by Ms. King, you are cordially invited to attend a reception located in the Celebrity Cafe in the lower front lobby of this building. At this time, I am honored to introduce our president of Iowa State University, Dr. Robert Parks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly. Members of the university community and friends, since this auditorium opened 10 years ago, it has been a forum for many outstanding personalities. We have been addressed by political figures, by scientists, news commentators, authors, actors, a Nobel Prize winner, and others, but none more distinguished than tonight's speaker, Mrs. Coretta Scott King. If Mrs. King had pursued her intention to be a concert artist, she might have appeared on this stage as a vocalist. It was while she was studying at the New England Conservatory of Music that she met and married a young man who was studying for the ministry. In marrying Martin Luther King Jr., she set aside her concert ambitions to devote herself to being a wife and mother. Events of the 1950s and 1960s would not let her fill that role in the relative obscurity that might be expected for the wife of a pastor, however. As her husband became more deeply involved in the leadership of the civil rights movement, it was important that she be at his side on some public occasions, and often it was necessary that she provide leadership in his absence. Her freedom concerts were a unique aspect of the civil rights movement. Mrs. King shared a dream with her husband that all people should be free, a dream that recognized that without peace there could be no freedom. What began as a bus boycott to break down the segregation that existed in Montgomery, Alabama, grew to be a massive campaign on behalf of the poor, the oppressed, and the victims of warfare, no matter what their race, no matter where their homeland. For this courageous and compelling effort, Dr. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Since her husband's death, Mrs. King has provided her own distinctive leadership to the cause of justice for all. She is recognized throughout the world as a great humanitarian, one of the most admired and influential persons of our time. Someone has said, Coretta King could never be an ordinary anything. Her extraordinary accomplishments attest to the truth of this statement. We are honored by your presence, Mrs. King, and it is with great pleasure and deep respect that I present you to this Iowa State University audience. Mrs. King.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parks, for that very generous and gracious introduction. And it certainly is a great pleasure for me to be here this evening. I have already enjoyed a very warm hospitality which has been extended to me by Dr. Jackson, as well as President Parks and Mrs. Parks, and I feel quite at home, and I want to thank you for receiving me so warmly here this evening. I think this is the first time I've been to your city after having traveled so much in the country. Sometimes it's a little difficult to remember where you've been, but it's good to be here tonight. And I want to share with you some of my thoughts on human rights and the challenge of the future. It is a subject which concerns all of us, and one which I'm deeply concerned with as president of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Social Change. I want to talk with you about a little bit about the center, because I'm sure many of you do not know what it is. The Martin Luther King Jr. Center is the official living memorial to the life and contributions of Martin Luther King Jr., located in Atlanta, Georgia, but it is national and international in scope. The Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Social Change, in a very real sense, a human rights organization. The King Center's central purpose is to make a significant contribution toward carrying on the unfinished work of the human rights movement led by my husband. We are deeply committed to a militant, nonviolent strategy for challenging the pressing social problems and social and economic problems facing America and the world. I feel very strongly about the importance of educational institutions like our state university, because the prerequisite to successful nonviolent action is education. As my husband once said, and I quote, "Education without social action is a one-sided value because it has no true power potential. Social action without education is a weak expression of pure energy." With this in mind, the King Center is an educational institution as well as a human rights organization dedicated to nonviolent action. To this end, we have organized a number of educational programs which I think you will find of interest. At the most basic level, we have a reading academy, one of the three major literary action groups in Atlanta, a city where more than 20% of the population is unable to read. In the 2 years since it was founded, a committed staff and volunteers have taught more than 500 Atlantans how to read. We also have a highly rated early learning center which provides daycare, nutritional requirements, and preschool education for 68 children at a time. The children enrolled in this program learn nonviolent problem solving, and the staff assists their parents with personal and domestic problems and in securing employment. In cooperation with the National Education Association, we have organized the annual Summer Institute on Nonviolence, which brings together veterans of the civil rights movement with scholars and activists. Both share in the lessons of past and present nonviolent movements. and explore new directions for the future. Our annual January program, Martin Luther King Jr. Week, draws hundreds of political leaders and activists to Atlanta for a week of conferences, workshops, and cultural events. January Week 1980 begins on January 10th and continues through the 15th. And I want to take this opportunity to invite you to come to Atlanta and join us for what I promise will be a unique and moving educational experience. The King Center Archives Project includes the largest, most important collection of my husband's private papers and related materials in existence. When all of these materials are fully processed and arranged, the Center's archives will be the most modern and advanced facility of its kind, open to scholars and researchers who are interested in the nonviolent civil rights movement. The King Center's Scholar Intern Program has served nearly 100 undergraduate and graduate students from colleges and universities across America. King Center interns combine intensive study of the theory, history, and practical application of nonviolent technique with field experience in a variety of social change organizations. And this is one program that many of you might be interested in investigating, and we would certainly welcome your taking some time and coming to Atlanta and being with us for a 12-week period, 11-week period, if this happens to be something that you would be interested in. In addition to the King Center, the King Center is actively assisting labor unions, organizing drives, and registering voters. We are organizing for legislative goals like the Equal Rights Amendment, full voting rights for the District of Columbia, implementation of the Humphrey Hawkins Act, and the Martin Luther King Jr. National Holiday. And I'd just like to say about the holiday, it is now before the Congress, the House of Representatives, and just on Wednesday, what is today? Wednesday, I believe today is Wednesday. Tuesday, I was in Washington to give support to the passage of the holiday bill at the House level. And we were not able to go with the vote because it would require 2/3 of the House of Representatives to assure passage without amendments and debate. Somehow the leadership in the House decided to do it this way because it would avoid the long debate and amendments which might make the bill really ineffective. We didn't quite have enough votes to pass it with 2/3, which they tell me would be 260 votes. But after polling the House and making numerous phone calls, we had 252 votes. But it's going to be coming up within the next week or so. And I want to urge you who are representatives, who are residents of the state of Iowa, to lobby with your congresspersons. And I just would like to tell you who those persons are that have not signed on to the bill as a co-sponsor or said they're going to vote. Thomas J. Tank, Neil Smith, Tom Harkin, Berkeley Bedell. Those are the ones you need to go after, and I urge your support. Finally, we are committed to build Freedom Hall, a living memorial to Martin Luther King Jr. We are institutionalizing what my husband stood for. God willing, in about 2 years, construction of Freedom Hall will be completed, and you will be able to come to Atlanta and visit the only major memorial to a black American. I believe we have made great progress in the worldwide struggle for human rights since the Nixon-Ford years. And much of the credit for this fact should go to former Ambassador Andrew Young for his role in promoting better relations with African and Arab nations. And I think we can agree that in terms of human rights, the foreign policy of this administration toward Latin American countries is not as bad as it might be, but it is much better than it has ever been. The headlines in recent weeks, however, have shown that we still have a long way to go before we can say that American foreign policy is totally effective in advancing human rights. Some serious questions remain. How can we ensure the security of Israel and the right of self-determination for Palestinian Arabs at the same time? What is our responsibility to the boat people of Vietnam and the refugees of Cambodia? What can be done to ensure peace in Northern Ireland? These are difficult, frustrating questions which confound even the most sophisticated decision makers in our foreign policy apparatus. Before 1976, dictatorships in countries as diverse as Chile, Rhodesia, and Iran could count on the United States to subsidize the most brutal abuses of human rights. Under this administration, however, that is not the case. We have fallen short of meeting our highest standards for human rights in American foreign policy, but it is clear that we are moving ahead. The human rights movement has also made impressive gains under this administration. Since Martin Luther King Jr. launched the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, I'd like to pause here and try to give a definition for human rights. When we started in Montgomery, Alabama, we were protesting the segregation of buses in Montgomery, Alabama. But the struggle was for human dignity and human decency. We had very simple goals, and each campaign that followed Montgomery, the objective was very clearly defined, and there was a very simple goal. And I think that was one of the reasons why we were successful. However, when we moved from segregation in buses, we went to public accommodations, lunch counters, hotels, parks, and then to voting rights, civil rights, political rights. And in the final stages of my husband's campaign and his last days, he was working for economic rights when he launched the Poor People's Campaign and was diverted to Memphis to support garbage workers in their union organizing efforts. So that I like to define human rights as those basic rights that include civil rights, economic civil rights, political rights, economic rights. We are at the stage now in our struggle, which I think is the most difficult phase of the human rights movement, where we are concerned with economic empowerment of those who have been left out of the system. In a sense, we can say that the solution to this problem will come when there is a more just distribution of the resources, the wealth of this nation and the wealth of the world. The human rights movement, which began in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, was a direct and successful challenge to the legitimacy of social segregation and the more blatant forms of discrimination. Although many of my husband's co-workers during the civil rights movement have gone their separate ways and have spread out across America, nearly all of them, along with a new generation of concerned activists, have continued to challenge racial discrimination which persists in our society. But despite the persistence of discrimination, it is important to recognize that we are continuing to make steady progress toward the achievement of the dream that was so eloquently expressed during the 1963 March on Washington. One has only to think of the thousands of black elected officials who have been elected throughout the South to recognize the profound social transformation which has occurred. In fact, the slogan of segregation forever, which still rings in the ears of those of us old enough to remember it, is no more than a faded passage in the history books for the new generation of Southern blacks. There is no question that America has still failed to do justly and love mercy in regard to the burning needs of black America, and I think we should be concerned about proposed budget cuts for programs which serve black and poor people. But it would be equally wrong to ignore the fact that the outlook for progress today is still far better than it was 5 or 10 years ago. America is now in a difficult period of transition. Having won certain basic victories, we must now face a new and complex set of problems in extending the quest for social progress into the realm of economic policy. To some, it may seem odd to include economic issues as part of human rights, but for the millions of poor people around the world, the two are inseparable. As my husband once put it, the right to eat in a restaurant is a hollow right if one does not have enough money to pay the bill. The experience of the civil rights movement illustrates that in its broadest sense, the term human rights must include not only basic civil rights and the political right to democratic choice, but also the economic right to a job and a minimum standard of economic security. My late husband always believed that the achievement of full economic rights, like the movement for civil and voting rights, should be of paramount concern to a decent society. And indeed, he gave his life for that belief. Martin recognized that economic rights, like civil and voting rights, are human rights. This was the philosophy behind the Poor People's Campaign, which my husband began in 1968, but it was not until 1974 when Representative Augustus Hawkins introduced his full employment bill that this goal became a concrete legislative proposal. I had the privilege of working very closely with a coalition of some 80 organizations, beginning with the educational process that must precede every piece of important, successful legislation, and carrying it through to the final passage. And now I am involved in the coalition effort, the Full Employment Action Council, toward the implementation of that bill. The Humphrey-Hawkins Act, which was signed into law by President Carter last year, is undeniable the single most important piece of economic legislation of the post-war period, because it does not simply establish one more program or agency. Instead, it requires the President and the Congress to coordinate the entire resources and powers of government for the achievement of genuine full employment. In a very practical sense, it is a commitment to create justice for all Americans as well as a high level of the gross national product. We should remember, however, that the Humphrey-Hawkins Act is much like the annual budget in its responsiveness to the demands of American citizens. In short, it is only as good as we the people make it, and this is where you come in. If you can help to spread the message, then I believe we will soon see a genuine improvement in the performance of our economy in serving human needs and raising the living standards of our people. I have frequently heard the assertions that this generation of students has no concern about social problems and are not committed to any ideals. But I do not believe that this is true. The challenges we face today are more complex and do not lend themselves to the tactics of the 1960s. Both the subtle diplomacy of influence in the human rights policies of other nations and the reforms needed to challenge economic injustice in America require far more knowledge and preparation on your part than did the struggles of 10 or 20 years ago. But I believe there is a reservoir of concern and talent in the students of today, and that the challenge of ensuring human rights is a challenge students like yourselves are willing to accept. In February of 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered one of his last sermons in which he described a personal struggle for excellence that each one of us must go through. And the sermon was entitled "The Drum Major Instinct." And I think it contains some wisdom which I hope you will consider at this transitional point in your lives as you are trying to determine which direction your future will take you in. It's not enough to get a good education, and we should get the best education possible. But it is extremely important that we get an education that is going to be useful in helping to create a society of justice, equality, and peace, that we are concerned individuals, not just about ourselves and our own families, but that we see ourselves as a part of a larger humanity that is all interrelated, that we are dependent, not independent, that each individual, no matter how poor, no matter how discouraged, no matter what their lives have been, no matter what their race, religion, or culture, no matter what the differences between us and them are, that each individual is a part of the larger humanity, and that we see ourselves, a part of ourselves in every human being, and that we have a responsibility to become concerned about making life better for all people as well as ourselves. Martin talks about the drum major instinct, and I think that it is quite appropriate to quote from that sermon as I conclude my talk. And he says, and there is deep down within all of us an instinct. It is kind of a drum major instinct, a desire to be out front, a desire to lead the parade, a desire to be first. And it is something that runs the whole gamut of life. And the great issue of life is to harness the drum major instinct. We've seen people who are very vivid examples of the drum major instinct, because these are the very self-centered individuals who want to be in the limelight and who want to be recognized. If you want to be important, he continues, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. There's nothing wrong with being great, but we can't be great by wanting to be great. But recognize that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. Martin continues to say that is your new definition of greatness. It means that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics and physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant. That is my challenge to you, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr. You can be that servant. And in being that servant, you will fulfill yourself and fulfill your highest potential and become a part of the creative minority working for change, working to bring about the kingdom of God on earth. I hope you'll accept the challenge. Thank you.